Most people would walk right past this coin without a second thought. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But the 1942 no-mint mark Lincoln penny quietly carries a wartime story, hidden details, and a collector appeal that surprises many people who discover one in an old jar or family collection. This is the 1942 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, meaning it was made in Philadelphia. At first glance, it seems like just another brown penny. But once you understand when it was made, what America was going through at that moment, and how small differences can change its value, this coin becomes far more interesting. In 1942, the United States was fully entering World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor had happened just months earlier, and the entire country was shifting toward a wartime economy. Factories were retooled, materials were rationed, and even everyday objects were affected. Coins were no exception. The Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for more than 30 years by that point. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1942, the design was familiar to every American. On the front was Lincoln's profile, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the back were two wheat ears framing the words 1 cent, which is why collectors often call these wheat pennies. The 1942 penny was struck at 3 mints. Philadelphia made coins with no mint mark. Denver used a small d, and San Francisco used an S. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest number, well over 600 million coins. That large number is one reason many people assume the coin has no value at all. But rarity is not only about how many were made. It is also about condition, errors, and historical context. One of the most important things about the 1942 penny is what it is made of. Unlike the famous 1943 steel pennies, the 1942 cent was still made primarily of copper. Its composition was about 95% copper, with small amounts of tin and zinc. This matters because copper was becoming increasingly important for wartime needs like ammunition and electrical wiring. By 1943, copper was considered too valuable to use for pennies, which is why the U.S. Mint switched to steel coated with zinc. That makes 1942 one of the last normal copper pennies before this dramatic change. In many ways, it represents the end of an era. The design itself is simple but iconic. Lincoln's portrait shows strong detail in the hair, cheekbone, and jawline when the coin is well preserved. The date 1942 is centered clearly at the bottom. The words "In God We Trust" appear along the top, and "Liberty" is to the left. On the reverse, the wheat ears symbolize prosperity and growth, a hopeful message during uncertain times. Most 1942 no-mint mark pennies you'll find today show signs of wear. That's because they circulated heavily during the war years and long after. When a coin has been handled for decades, details slowly fade. Lincoln's hair becomes flat, the wheat lines blur, and the surfaces darken. This is where value begins to change. A heavily worn 1942 penny is usually worth only a few cents. But a coin that was saved early or simply got lucky and avoided circulation can be worth much more. Uncirculated examples, especially those with original red copper color, are what collectors really want. These coins still show bright luster and sharp details. In higher grades, the value rises quickly. Certified examples in mint state condition have sold at auctions for impressive amounts. A typical uncirculated 1942 no-mint mark penny in lower mint state grades might sell for $10 to $30. But coins graded MS66 or MS67 by professional grading services have sold for hundreds, and in rare cases, several $1,000s, depending on eye appeal and color. Then there are errors. Error coins are mistakes made during the minting process, and they can dramatically increase value. For 1942 pennies, errors like off-center strikes, double strikes, or clipped planchets are known and collected. One of the most fascinating possibilities is a 1942 penny struck on the wrong metal. A tiny number of 1942 cents were accidentally struck on steel planchets intended for 1943. These are extremely rare and highly valuable. If a 1942 penny sticks to a magnet, that is a serious red flag worth further investigation. Authentic examples have sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Because of these values, fakes and altered coins do exist. Some people attempt to plate normal pennies or alter dates. That's why knowing how to identify a genuine 1942 no mint mark penny is important. First, check the date carefully. The numbers should look natural, not uneven or scratched. Second, look for a mint mark. If there is no letter under the date, that indicates Philadelphia. Third, test the weight if possible. A genuine copper 1942 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. Steel fakes will weigh less and stick to a magnet. The color is also important. Original copper pennies often have a smooth, even tone, whether brown, red-brown, or red. Artificial plating often looks too shiny or unnatural. There are also small details that collectors love. Some 1942 pennies show very strong strikes, with full detail in Lincoln's coat and the wheat lines. Others show minor die cracks or variations that add character, even if they don't add major value. One fun fact is that many Americans unknowingly saved 1942 pennies when steel cents appeared in 1943. People disliked the steel coins because they rusted and were easily confused with dimes. As a result, some earlier copper pennies, including 1942, were pulled from circulation and tucked away. Collectors today love the 1942 no mint mark penny because it tells a complete story. It connects the Great Depression-era designs with the dramatic changes of World War II. It is common enough to be accessible, yet rare enough in top condition to be exciting. It's also a favorite entry coin for new collectors. Someone can start with a simple circulated example and later upgrade to a better one as they learn more. Every step teaches something about history, preservation, and value. Perhaps the most important thing about this coin is that it reminds us how ordinary objects can become historical witnesses. This penny may have passed through the hands of factory workers, soldiers' families, or children saving spare change during rationing. Each coin carries silent stories we can only imagine. So the next time you see a 1942 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look closer. Check the details. Think about the year it was made and what the country was facing at that moment. Sometimes, the most unassuming coins are the ones with the most to say. And sometimes, the real value isn't just in the price, but in the history you're holding in the palm of your hand. Most people would never look twice at a 1967 penny. But what if I told you that this ordinary-looking coin was born during one of the most unusual moments in U.S. coin history? A time when mint marks disappeared, collectors panicked, and a single penny could quietly become far more interesting than its face value suggests. Stay with me, because this small copper coin has a story most Americans have never heard. The coin we're talking about today is the 1967 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks just like many other Lincoln cents you may have seen or even spent. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. But the year 1967 places this penny in a very special category, and understanding why requires going back to a turbulent period in American coinage. The Lincoln penny itself was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person rather than a symbolic figure. By 1967, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for nearly 6 decades, and its design was deeply familiar to the public. However, the country was facing a serious problem that directly affected this coin. During the early to mid-1960s, the United States experienced a nationwide coin shortage. People were pulling coins out of circulation, hoarding them at home, and saving them in jars and drawers. Many believed that coins might soon be worth more than their face value because of rising metal prices and growing collector interest. This behavior made everyday transactions difficult and forced the U.S. Mint to take drastic action. To stop the hoarding and return coins to circulation, the U.S. government made a controversial decision. From 1965 through 1967, the Mint removed mint marks entirely from most U.S. coins. That means no D for Denver and no S for San Francisco. The idea was simple. If people couldn't tell where a coin was made, they would be less likely to collect and hoard them. This is why the 1967 Lincoln penny has no mint mark. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate move during a very specific historical window. Every regular 1967 penny was struck without a mint mark, regardless of where it was made. This alone makes the coin interesting, because it ties directly into a nationwide economic issue that affected millions of Americans. Now let's talk about what this penny is actually made of. The 1967 Lincoln cent is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives it that classic warm brown or reddish color that many people associate with older pennies. Unlike modern cents, which are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating, the 1967 penny feels heavier and more solid in the hand. On the front, or obverse, you'll see Abraham Lincoln designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, and behind him is the year 1967. The phrase "In God We Trust" curves along the top edge. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with United States of America and EPLURIBUS UNUM above it and 1 cent below. While most 1967 pennies are common, certain examples stand out. One of the most important is the 1967 Special Mint Set penny, often called an SMS penny. These were not regular circulation coins. They were specially made for collectors during the years when proof coins were temporarily discontinued. SMS coins have sharper details, smoother surfaces, and a more refined appearance than standard pennies. Another area that attracts collector attention is mint errors. Because millions of 1967 pennies were produced quickly to solve the coin shortage, mistakes did happen. Some coins were struck off-center, some show doubled letters or numbers, and others have cracks or die breaks in the metal. While these errors are not common, they can significantly increase a coin's value if they are clear and well preserved. So why would anyone consider the 1967 penny rare or valuable? The truth is, most are not rare. In circulated condition, a typical 1967 penny is usually worth only a few cents above face value. However, condition is everything. A 1967 penny that has never been circulated, with full original luster and no wear, can be far more desirable to collectors. High-grade examples, especially those graded by professional coin grading services, can sell for surprising amounts. Uncirculated 1967 pennies with strong red color have sold for tens or even hundreds of dollars, depending on quality. Special mint set pennies in top condition have sold for even more at auction, especially when they display exceptional strike quality and surface preservation. There have also been real auction results that caught collectors off guard. Some high-grade 1967 SMS pennies have sold for several $1,000s when certified at the highest levels. These are not everyday finds, but they prove that even a coin most people ignore can become valuable under the right circumstances. If you're wondering how to tell if you have a real 1967 penny and not something altered or misrepresented, there are a few simple checks you can do at home. First, look at the date and confirm it reads 1967. Next, check for the absence of a mint mark below the date. This is normal for this year, so its absence does not mean the coin is fake. Then examine the weight and color. A genuine 1967 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams, and have the rich copper tone of pennies 1,982 cents. Be cautious of coins that look too shiny or have unusual color, as they may have been cleaned or altered. Cleaning a coin can actually reduce its value, even if it makes it look nicer. Another key detail is the strike quality. Real special mint set coins have smooth, satin-like surfaces rather than mirror-like proof finishes. If someone claims a regular-looking penny is extremely rare without professional grading, that's a red flag. When in doubt, a reputable coin dealer or grading service can help confirm authenticity. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1967 penny. This was one of the last years before major changes in U.S. coin production resumed. In 1968, mint marks returned, proof coins came back, and the coin shortage slowly eased. That makes 1967 part of a very short and unusual era in American numismatic history. Another interesting detail is that many 1967 pennies sat untouched in rolls and jars for decades. Because people knew something unusual was happening with coins at the time, some saved them anyway, despite the government's efforts. As a result, uncirculated examples still appear today, sometimes found in old collections or inherited boxes. Collectors today are drawn to the 1967 penny not because it's flashy, but because it tells a story. It represents a moment when the government stepped in to control how Americans interacted with their own money. It reflects economic pressure, public behavior, and a temporary break from tradition that has never been repeated in quite the same way. For new collectors, the 1967 penny is an accessible starting point. It's affordable, easy to recognize, and rich in historical context. For advanced collectors, high-grade and special mint set examples offer a challenge and a chance to own something truly exceptional from a misunderstood year. As you look at your own change or dig through old coin jars, remember this. History doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, in a small brown coin dated 1967, quietly carrying the story of a nation, a shortage, and a decision that changed American coins forever. So the next time you see a 1967 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. You might be holding a simple cent, or you might be holding a small but meaningful piece of American history that still has more to tell. Imagine finding a penny so ordinary that millions of people once ignored it, yet today collectors stop, look twice, and sometimes pay far more than 1 cent for it. This is the story of the 1968 mint mark Lincoln penny, a small coin with a surprisingly important place in American history. At first glance, the 1968 Lincoln penny looks just like many other pennies you may have seen in pocket change. It shows Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But the tiny letter under the date, the letter S, quietly tells a story that connects this coin to a major turning point in U.S. coinage. The 1968 Lincoln penny was made at the San Francisco Mint. To understand why that matters, we need to go back in time. During the early 1960s, the United States faced a serious coin shortage. People were saving coins, silver prices were rising, and everyday change was disappearing from circulation. To fight this problem, the U.S. Mint made a bold decision. From 1965 through 1967, mint marks were removed from all coins. The goal was to discourage collectors from hoarding specific coins from certain mints. By 1968, the shortage had eased, and the mint brought back mint marks. That year marked the return of the familiar letters D and S on U.S. coins. For collectors, this moment mattered. The 1968 Lincoln penny represents the return of mint identity after 3 silent years. In 1968, the San Francisco Mint had a special role. Unlike earlier decades, San Francisco no longer focused on making large numbers of regular circulation coins. Instead, it became known mainly for producing proof coins. Proof coins are specially made for collectors. They are struck with extra care, using polished dies and planchets, creating sharp details and mirror-like surfaces. Most 1968's Lincoln pennies you'll encounter are proof coins. They were not meant for everyday use. They were sold directly to collectors as part of proof sets. This is one of the key reasons the coin stands out today. The coin itself is made mostly of copper. At the time, pennies were composed of about 95% copper with a small amount of zinc. This gives the coin its warm, reddish color when well preserved. The front features Abraham Lincoln, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. The portrait was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and remains one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial. If you look closely, you can even spot a tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside the building. This reverse design was used from 1959 through 2008, making the 1968's part of a long and familiar series. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made in large numbers? The answer lies in condition, details, and a few special variations. While millions of 1968's proof pennies were produced, not all survived in perfect shape. Proof coins are delicate. Many were mishandled, scratched, or exposed to air and moisture over the decades. Collectors pay close attention to quality. A well-preserved 1968's proof penny can have deep, mirror-like fields and frosted details on Lincoln's portrait. Coins with this strong contrast are often called deep cameo proofs. These are especially desirable and harder to find than regular proofs. There are also errors that add to the coin's appeal. Some 1968's pennies were struck with minor mistakes, such as doubled lettering or off-center strikes. One known example is doubled die errors, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. These errors are not common, and when confirmed, they can significantly raise a coin's value. In most cases, a typical 1968's proof penny in average condition is not extremely expensive. Many sell for a few dollars. However, higher-grade examples tell a different story. Coins graded in near-perfect condition by professional grading services can sell for much more. Some top-quality deep cameo proofs have sold at auction for hundreds of dollars, especially when demand is high and supply is limited. Collectors love documented examples. In past auctions, pristine 1968's proof Lincoln pennies with strong deep cameo contrast have achieved impressive prices compared to their face value. While these are not everyday results, they show what collectors are willing to pay for exceptional quality. If you think you might have a 1968's Lincoln penny, it's important to know how to identify a real one. First, check the date. Under the year 1968 on the front, look for a small S mint mark. Proof coins usually have very sharp details and reflective surfaces. The edges should be smooth and the strike should look crisp. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to add mint marks to regular pennies. A genuine S mint mark will look clean and properly shaped, matching known examples. If a coin seems suspicious, having it examined by a reputable coin dealer or grading service is the safest option. Another way to spot authenticity is weight and color. A genuine 1968 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams and have a copper tone. Major differences could indicate damage or alteration. One fun fact about the 1968's penny is that it represents San Francisco's transition into a collector-focused mint. Today, San Francisco is famous for its proof coin production, and this penny is part of that legacy. It also belongs to a generation of coins made just before major changes in U.S. coin metals during the 1970s and 1980s. Another interesting detail is how many of these proof pennies are still tucked away in old proof sets. Families often inherited these sets without realizing their significance. Sometimes, a beautifully preserved coin sits unnoticed for decades in a drawer or safe. Collectors are drawn to the 1968 Lincoln penny because it combines history, beauty, and accessibility. It's not a coin reserved only for wealthy collectors. Beginners can own one, study it, and learn what makes quality and rarity matter. Advanced collectors seek the finest examples, chasing the perfect balance of mirror shine and frosted detail. This penny also tells a larger story about American coinage. It reflects a moment when the U.S. Mint responded to economic pressure, adjusted its practices, and reconnected with collectors. Holding one is like holding a small piece of that history. As interest in classic U.S. coins continues to grow, coins like the 1968 Lincoln penny remain popular. They are familiar, yet they still offer surprises for those who look closely. Whether it's a stunning deep cameo proof or a rare error, this penny proves that even the smallest coins can carry meaningful stories. So the next time you see a penny with an S under the date, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. You might be holding more than spare change. You might be holding a quiet witness to a turning point in American minting history, waiting to be noticed once again. Most people walk past this coin every day without a second thought. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But hidden inside the story of the 1970 Lincoln penny is a quiet surprise that has made collectors stop, stare, and sometimes pay far more than 1 cent ever should be worth. This coin is the 1970 Lincoln 1-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small letter D below the date. At first glance, it seems like just another copper penny from the late 20th century. But the year 1970 sits at a very important turning point in American coin history, and the Denver minted version carries details that many people overlook. The Lincoln penny design itself was already more than 60 years old by 1970. Abraham Lincoln's portrait had been introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By the time this penny was minted, it had become one of the most recognizable coins in the United States. The front shows Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1970 to the right, followed by the small D mint mark. On the back, the coin still featured the Lincoln Memorial design, which had replaced the wheat stalks in 1959. The memorial wasn't just decorative. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside the building. It is one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. To understand why the 1970 penny matters, you have to understand what was happening in America at the time. The country was going through major social and economic changes. The Vietnam War was ongoing. Inflation was rising. Metal prices were becoming a concern for the U.S. Mint. Just a few years earlier, in 1965, the government had removed silver from most circulating coins to reduce costs. Copper was next on the watch list. In 1970, pennies were still made mostly of copper. Specifically, the 1970 Lincoln cent is composed of about 95% copper and 5% zinc. This makes it heavier and more valuable in metal content than modern pennies struck after 1982, which are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. For many collectors, the 1970 penny represents the final era of the classic, solid copper cent. The Denver Mint produced a very large number of these coins. Over 2 billion were struck. That sounds like it would make the coin common and worthless, and in most cases, that is true. A typical worn 1970 penny found in pocket change is usually worth just 1 or 2 cents. But rarity in coin collecting is not always about how many were made. It is about condition, detail, and mistakes. One of the most important features collectors look for on this coin is strike quality. Many 1970 pennies were struck with weaker detail, especially in Lincoln's hair and the lettering. Finding one with sharp, full detail is harder than people expect. Coins with strong strikes and original reddish color are much more desirable. Another key factor is errors. Errors are accidental mistakes made during the minting process, and they can turn an ordinary coin into a valuable collectible. On the 1970 D penny, collectors watch closely for off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned. They also look for doubled dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misaligned die. While the most famous doubled die from 1970 is associated with the Philadelphia Mint, minor doubling and mechanical doubling can still appear on Denver coins. Some examples show slight doubling on the date or lettering that catches the eye of experienced collectors. There are also repunched mint marks on some 1970 D pennies. In that era, mint marks were punched into the dies by hand. Sometimes the punch was applied more than once, creating a doubled or slightly shifted D. These are subtle and require magnification, but collectors pay attention to them. Condition plays a massive role in value. Coins are graded on a scale, and pennies in mint state condition, meaning they show no wear from circulation, are far scarcer than worn examples. A 1970 D penny with full original red color, no spots and sharp detail can sell for significantly more than face value. In lower mint state grades, these coins might sell for a few dollars. But in higher grades, especially those certified by professional grading services, prices can climb into the tens or even hundreds of dollars. Some top-grade examples have sold at auction for amounts that surprise people who think all pennies are worthless. Collectors also care deeply about originality. A coin that has never been cleaned or altered is far more valuable than one that has been polished to look shiny. Cleaning removes microscopic layers of metal and destroys the natural surface, permanently lowering the coin's value. So how can you tell if you have a real 1970 D Lincoln penny worth a closer look? First, check the date and mint mark carefully. The D should be clearly visible below the year. Use a magnifying glass if needed. Next, look at the color. Original copper pennies from 1970 should have a natural reddish or reddish-brown tone, not a bright mirror-like shine. Then examine the details. Look closely at Lincoln's hair, the letters in Liberty, and the date. Sharp edges and clear lines are good signs. If the coin looks blurry or flat in these areas, it may be heavily worn or weakly struck. Weighing the coin can also help. A genuine 1970 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. Significant differences could indicate damage or alteration. While counterfeiting pennies is rare, altered coins do exist, especially those changed to imitate rarer varieties. One surprising fact about the 1970 penny era is how close it was to a major composition change. Just a few years later, the mint would seriously experiment with alternative metals for cents. The solid copper penny was becoming too expensive to produce. This makes the 1970 D penny part of the final chapter of an older tradition. Another fun detail is that millions of Americans alive today use these exact coins in everyday life. They paid for candy, phone calls, newspapers, and parking meters. Each coin carries decades of quiet history in its scratches and surfaces. Collectors love the 1970 D Lincoln penny not because it is flashy, but because it represents a moment in time. It sits at the crossroads between old and new. Old copper, old minting techniques, and a classic design, just before modern changes reshaped American coinage. For beginner collectors, it is an affordable and accessible coin to study. For advanced collectors, finding one in exceptional condition or with a genuine error becomes a rewarding challenge. It is a coin that teaches patience, attention to detail, and respect for history. Today, many people are going back through jars, drawers, and inherited collections, taking a second look at coins they once ignored. And every so often, a well-preserved 1970 D penny emerges, reminding us that value is not always obvious at first glance. So the next time you see a copper penny dated 1970 with a small D beneath the year, don't rush past it. Hold it for a moment. Look closer, because sometimes the most ordinary-looking coins carry the most interesting stories, waiting quietly to be discovered. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet could quietly tell a story about American history, economic change, and the hidden world of coin collecting. Today, we're talking about a coin millions of people have seen but very few truly understand. The 1973 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, this coin doesn't seem special. It's a 1-cent piece, copper-colored. Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Nothing flashy. And yet, this small coin represents a turning point in U.S. coin history, a moment when America itself was changing. The 1973 D. Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries a small D mint mark below the date on the front of the coin. In 1973, the United States Mint produced billions of pennies to keep up with everyday commerce. Inflation was rising, the economy was under pressure, and Americans were using cash constantly. Pennies were everywhere, and the mint needed to make a lot of them. This was still part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series, which began in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1973, the design had been familiar for decades. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln remained on the front, strong and dignified, while the back still featured the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. But even though the design stayed the same, the world around this penny was very different. The early 1970s were a time of major economic change in the United States. The country was dealing with inflation, the oil crisis was just around the corner, and the cost of metals was rising. That reality would soon change how pennies were made forever. The 1973 D penny is made primarily of copper. Specifically, it contains about 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of zinc and small amounts of tin. This is important because only a few years later, the U.S. Mint would abandon this copper-heavy composition due to rising costs. By 1982, pennies would be mostly zinc, with only a thin copper coating. That means the 1973 D penny belongs to the final era of true copper cents. To many collectors, that alone gives it historical importance. It represents the end of an age, when pennies had real metal weight and intrinsic value. In terms of appearance, the coin is simple but elegant. Lincoln's profile faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" along the top edge. The word "Liberty" appears to the left, and the date 1973 sits to the right, just above the mint mark D. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, with the words "United States of America" and 1 cent clearly visible. Most 1973 D pennies you'll find today are worn from circulation. They've passed through countless hands, cash registers, and coin jars. These circulated examples are very common and usually worth only face value. But this is where things get interesting. Not all 1973 D pennies are the same. Collectors pay close attention to condition. A penny that has never been used, never circulated, and still has its original shine can be dramatically more valuable than one that's been worn down over time. These are known as uncirculated coins, and the best of them are graded by professional services. In high mint state grades, especially coins graded M-67 or higher, the value can rise significantly. While most people think of pennies as worthless, top-quality examples of the 1973 D penny have sold for surprising prices at auction. In some cases, pristine specimens have sold for hundreds of dollars, simply because so few survive in that condition. But condition is only part of the story. Errors and unusual variations are where collectors really get excited. During the massive production runs of the early 1970s, mistakes sometimes happened at the mint. These errors were not intentional, and they often went unnoticed at the time. Today, they can be highly collectible. Some known error types for 1973 D pennies include off-center strikes, where the design is noticeably shifted away from the center of the coin. There are also double die errors, where parts of the design appear doubled, especially in the lettering or date. These doubling effects are not the same as damage or wear. They are created during the minting process. Another interesting category is planchet errors. These occur when something goes wrong with the metal blank before it's struck. While rare, a 1973 penny struck on an improper or defective planchet can be worth far more than a normal example. One of the reasons the 1973 penny attracts attention is because people often confuse it with the famous 1973 aluminum cent. In 1973, the U.S. Mint experimented with aluminum pennies as a possible replacement for copper cents. These aluminum coins were never released into circulation and are considered extremely rare and controversial. While the 1973 penny is not aluminum, this connection adds to the year's mystique and curiosity. When it comes to real-world values, context matters. A heavily worn 1973 penny is typically worth 1 cent. A lightly circulated example might be worth a few cents. But a bright, sharply struck uncirculated coin can sell for several dollars, and top-grade certified examples have sold at auction for well over $100. Error coins, depending on the type and severity of the error, can range from tens of dollars to several $100s. In rare cases, exceptional errors may sell for even more, especially if they are visually dramatic and well documented. So how can you tell if you have a real 1973 penny and not something altered or damaged? First, check the weight. A genuine 1973 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter or heavier, it may be damaged or altered. Next, examine the mint mark. The D should look clean and consistent with the rest of the design, not scratched or added later. Look closely at the details. Real mint errors usually affect the entire design in a consistent way. If something looks random or uneven, it may just be damage from circulation. Magnification helps, but so does patience. One of the most important steps, especially for valuable-looking coins, is professional authentication. Reputable grading services can confirm whether a coin is genuine, assign it a grade, and protect it in a sealed holder. This can make a major difference in value and trust. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1973 penny. Even though billions were made, very few were saved in perfect condition at the time. Most people didn't think about preserving modern pennies. They were just spare change. That's why high-grade examples are scarcer today than you might expect. Another interesting detail is how this coin reflects everyday American life in the 1970s. It was used to buy newspapers, candy, stamps, and bus fare. It passed through the hands of children, workers, and families during a decade of cultural and economic change. Collectors today love the 1973 penny not because it's flashy or famous, but because it tells a quiet story. It represents the final years of copper cents, the scale of U.S. minting operations, and the idea that even the most ordinary objects can become meaningful over time. For many collectors, this coin is also accessible. You don't need to be wealthy to own one. You can find them in old jars, inherited collections, or even rolls from the bank. That sense of possibility is part of the appeal. The 1973 Lincoln penny reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes, it's hidden in history, condition, and tiny details that most people overlook. So the next time you see a simple brown penny with a small D under the date, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. You might be holding a small piece of American history, quietly waiting to be noticed. And if you're curious about what other everyday coins might be hiding surprising stories, values, and secrets, you're not alone. Sometimes, the most fascinating treasures are the ones we've been carrying around all along. Imagine finding a penny so ordinary that you almost ignore it, yet it quietly tells a story about the last years of America's classic copper money. A coin that millions of people spent without a second thought, and that today makes collectors stop, flip it over, and look twice. This is the 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, this coin looks simple. Abraham Lincoln's familiar face, a warm brown copper tone, no letter under the date. But that missing mint mark is exactly what pulls many people in. It raises a question that collectors love to ask. Why is there no mint mark at all, and does that make this penny special? The 1980 no mint mark Lincoln penny was struck by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. For most of the Lincoln cents history, coins made in Philadelphia did not carry a mint mark. So when you see a 1980 penny with no letter under the date, it simply means it was made in Philadelphia, just like hundreds of millions of others that year. But to understand why this coin still matters, we need to step back in time. The year 1980 was a moment of change in the United States. Inflation was rising. Metal prices were climbing. The cost to produce a penny was getting dangerously close to its face value. The U.S. Mint knew something had to change soon, and the 1980 Lincoln penny was part of the final chapter of an era. This penny was made mostly of copper, about 95% copper, with a small amount of zinc mixed in. That makes it part of the classic copper Lincoln cents that Americans had used for generations. Just 2 years later, in 1982, the mint would switch to a cheaper zinc-based composition to save money. That makes the 1980 penny one of the last true copper cents in everyday circulation. When this coin was released, nobody thought of it as collectible. It was pocket change. It bought candy, newspapers, and parking meters. Children dropped it on sidewalks. Adults tossed it into jars. Millions were minted and most were spent immediately. The design, of course, is iconic. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces right, just as he has since 1909. His portrait was designed by Victor David Brenner, and by 1980 it was one of the most recognizable images in American money. Above Lincoln's head is the word liberty. In front of his face is the phrase "In God We Trust." Below is the date, 1980, with no mint mark beneath it. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Look closely, and you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, one of the smallest human figures ever placed on a U.S. coin. This reverse design would remain until 2008, making the 1980 penny a familiar but historically important piece of that long-running series. So if millions were made, why do collectors still care? The answer lies in condition, composition, and mistakes. Most 1980 no-mint mark pennies are worth 1 cent, but not all pennies are created equal. Coins that were never circulated, meaning they never entered everyday use, can look almost brand new even decades later. These are called uncirculated coins, and collectors prize them for their sharp details and original shine. In high grades, especially when professionally graded by trusted services, a 1980 Philadelphia penny can sell for several dollars. That may not sound exciting at first, but it shows how condition alone can turn spare change into a collectible. Then there are error coins. During the minting process, mistakes can happen, and when they do, they create coins that are unique, rare, and highly desirable. Some 1980 pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is pushed to one side. Others may show doubled details, where letters or numbers appear slightly duplicated due to a misalignment during striking. There are also clipped planchet errors, where a piece of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, leaving a curved bite-like shape along the edge. These errors are genuine mint mistakes, not damage, and collectors will pay a premium for them. Verified error examples of 1980 no-mint mark pennies have sold at auction for anywhere from $20 to several $100s, depending on how dramatic and well-preserved the error is. These are not everyday finds, but they are real, documented sales that keep collectors searching through rolls and jars of old pennies. Another reason this coin gets attention is its copper content. Because the 1980 penny is mostly copper, it weighs about 3.11 grams, heavier than modern zinc pennies. Some collectors and hobbyists like to separate copper cents as a way of preserving a piece of monetary history. While melting pennies for metal value is illegal, owning them as collectibles is perfectly legal, and many people enjoy building copper-only collections. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. First, look at the date. It should clearly read 1980. Below the date, there should be no letter at all. No D, no S, just a blank space. That confirms it was minted in Philadelphia. Next, check the weight. A genuine copper 1980 penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. A small variation is normal, but a much lighter weight could indicate damage or a different composition. Look closely at the details. The lettering should be sharp, not mushy. Lincoln's features should be well defined. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial lines should be clear, especially the steps and columns. Be cautious of altered coins. Sometimes people try to remove mint marks from other pennies to make them look like no mint mark coins. Under magnification, tampering often leaves scratches or an uneven surface. A genuine Philadelphia coin will look smooth and natural where the mint mark would normally appear. For valuable error coins, professional authentication is key. Reputable grading services can confirm whether an unusual coin is a true mint error or just damage from circulation. There are also some fun and surprising details about the 1980 penny that many people don't realize. Because it is copper, this coin often develops beautiful natural toning over time. Some examples turn deep chocolate brown. Others show hints of red, orange, or even purple tones. Collectors love these natural colors, especially when they appear evenly across the coin. Another interesting fact is that 1980 pennies were minted in extremely large numbers because the penny was still heavily used in daily transactions. This makes them easy to find today, which is part of their charm. Anyone can start searching without spending much money. The 1980 penny also represents a psychological turning point. It comes from the era just before the penny began losing its importance in everyday commerce. Vending machines, parking meters, and prices would soon change. The copper penny you could feel the weight of was about to disappear. Collectors today appreciate this coin not because it is rare in numbers, but because it marks the end of something familiar. It is a reminder of when American coins were made from valuable metals and built to last. For beginners, the 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is often a gateway coin. It teaches important lessons about mint marks, coin composition, grading, and errors. It invites curiosity without intimidation. And for experienced collectors, finding a high-grade or error example still brings excitement. So the next time you come across a small brown penny dated 1980, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it. Look at it. Remember where it fits in American history. It may not make you rich, but it connects you to a moment when the humble penny was standing at the edge of change. Sometimes, the most ordinary coins tell the most interesting stories. And the 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is proof that even common change can carry uncommon meaning. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet carries a story tied to American history, changing metal, and the quiet details collectors search for every day. Today, we're diving into one of the most overlooked coins in circulation, the 1986 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, and why this small copper-colored coin still sparks curiosity decades later. The 1986 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint. When a penny has no mint mark, it means it was made in Philadelphia, the original and oldest U.S. mint. Millions of these coins were struck, passed through countless hands, and spent on everyday purchases. Because of that, many people assume it has no story and no value beyond 1 cent. But as with many coins, the details tell a much deeper story. To understand this penny, we need to step back to the mid-1980s. In 1986, The United States was in a period of economic change and modernization. Coin production had already shifted away from solid copper just a few years earlier. Rising metal prices forced the U.S. Mint to rethink how pennies were made. By this time, most Lincoln cents were no longer solid copper. Instead, they were made with a zinc core and a thin copper coating. The 1986 penny reflects this important transition in American coinage history. The Lincoln cent design itself had already been around for decades by 1986. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. That made the Lincoln cent the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. By 1986, Americans were deeply familiar with Lincoln's portrait, but the coin still carried symbolic weight. It represented unity, history, and the everyday money that connected every American, regardless of income or background. On the front of the 1986 penny, you'll see Lincoln facing right. The words "In God We Trust" appear above his head. Liberty is written to the left, and the date 1986 sits to the right. There is no letter under the date, which confirms it was struck in Philadelphia. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, one of the smallest engraved figures on any U.S. coin. The metal composition of the 1986 penny is one of its most important features. It is made of 97.5% zinc with a 2.5% copper plating. This change made the penny much lighter than earlier copper cents. If you compare it to a penny from the 1960s or 1970s, you may notice a difference in weight and sound. This shift in metal is a key reason collectors pay attention to pennies from the 1980s, including 1986. At first glance, the 1986 no-mint mark penny does not appear rare. In fact, over 4 billion pennies were minted that year across all mints, with Philadelphia producing a large portion of them. Because so many were made, most examples found in circulation today are worth only face value. But that is not the end of the story. What makes certain 1986 pennies interesting is condition and errors. Coin collectors know that value often depends not on age alone, but on preservation. A 1986 penny that has never been circulated, meaning it shows no wear, scratches, or discoloration, can be far more desirable than one that has passed through decades of use. These uncirculated coins are often graded by professionals and stored carefully to protect their surfaces. Errors are another reason collectors pay attention to this coin. During the minting process, mistakes can happen. Some 1986 pennies show doubled letters, especially in the date or the words on the front of the coin. This is known as a double die error. Others may be off-center, struck with too much or too little pressure, or have cracks in the metal caused by worn dies. While these errors are uncommon, they do exist, and when verified, they can dramatically increase a coin's value. There have been real examples of 1986 no-mint mark pennies selling for more than 1 cent. In average circulated condition, they are usually worth face value. But in uncirculated condition, especially those graded at the highest levels, some have sold for several dollars. Error coins can sell for even more. Verified double die examples or dramatic mint errors have been known to sell for tens or even hundreds of dollars, depending on rarity and demand at the time of sale. Collectors are careful when evaluating value, and so should you. Not every unusual-looking penny is valuable. Damage caused after the coin leaves the mint, such as scratches, dents, or corrosion, does not increase value. True mint errors happen during production and follow specific patterns. That's why serious collectors often rely on professional grading services to confirm authenticity. Identifying a real 1986 no-mint mark penny is fairly simple. First, check the date and look for the absence of a mint mark below it. Next, examine the weight if you have a scale. A standard 1986 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more, it could be unusual, but it could also be damaged or altered. Look closely at the lettering and numbers under good light and magnification. True errors often show clear doubling or consistent misalignment, not random damage. Counterfeits of common pennies are rare, but altered coins do exist. Some people attempt to modify coins to imitate errors. This is why knowledge is important. Learning what real mint errors look like protects collectors from overpaying or being misled. One surprising fact about the 1986 penny is how many people unknowingly saved them. During the 1980s, many Americans began putting aside rolls of pennies, thinking they might someday be valuable like older copper cents. As a result, there are still many uncirculated 1986 pennies sitting in drawers, jars, and old collections. This abundance keeps values modest, but it also means finding a high-quality example is still possible today. Collectors love the 1986 no mint mark penny not because it is rare, but because it represents a moment in modern coin history. It reflects a shift in materials, mass production, and everyday American life. It is a reminder that even common objects can tell meaningful stories when we slow down and look closely. For new collectors, this penny is an easy and affordable entry point into the hobby. It teaches the basics of mint marks, condition, errors, and historical context. For experienced collectors, it offers the challenge of finding the best possible example or a genuine error among billions of similar coins. So the next time you see a 1986 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it up to the light. Look at Lincoln's portrait, the memorial on the back, and the quiet details stamped into its surface. That small coin has traveled through time, passed through countless hands, and still carries the marks of American history. And who knows? The penny you overlook today could be the one that sparks a deeper interest in coins, history, and the hidden stories hiding in plain sight. Sometimes, the most ordinary coins are the ones that invite us to look a little closer and ask one simple question: what else might I be missing? Imagine holding a penny in your hand that looks completely ordinary, something you might have ignored for years. Now imagine discovering that this exact penny could be worth far more than 1 cent, not because it's ancient, but because of small details most people never notice. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind the 2006 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, and why collectors still pay close attention to this modern coin. The 2006 D Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Denver. The small letter D, just below the year, tells us exactly where it was made. At first glance, this penny seems like everyday pocket change. Millions of Americans have spent it, saved it in jars, or lost it between couch cushions. But in the world of coin collecting, even common coins can carry hidden stories, surprising value, and unexpected appeal. To understand this penny, we need to step back into the year 2006. The United States was in a period of rapid technological growth, and the penny had already been part of American life for more than 2 centuries. By this time, the Lincoln cent design had been in use since 1909, created to honor President Abraham Lincoln on the 100th anniversary of his birth. In 2006, the country was just a few years away from major design changes that would arrive in 2009. But for now, the familiar Lincoln portrait remained. The Denver Mint played a major role in penny production in 2006. That year, hundreds of millions of pennies were struck in Denver alone. The goal was not to create rare collectibles, but to keep everyday commerce moving smoothly. Pennies were still heavily used, and the mint needed massive quantities to meet demand. As a result, the 2006 D penny is considered a modern circulation coin, widely available and still commonly found today. Even though it was mass-produced, the coin itself carries classic design elements that collectors appreciate. On the front, or obverse, is the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design, originally created by Victor David Brenner, is one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God We Trust." In front of his face is the word "Liberty," and just behind him sits the date 2006 with a small D mint mark beneath it. The back, or reverse, of the 2006 D penny features the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. It's one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. Above the memorial are the words "United States of America," with E pluribus unum just below and 1 cent at the bottom. In terms of metal, the 2006 D Lincoln penny is made primarily of zinc, with a thin copper coating on the outside. This composition was introduced in 1982 to reduce production costs as copper prices rose. While older solid copper pennies often attract attention, these copper-plated zinc cents still have a place in modern collecting, especially when they are found in exceptional condition. So if millions were made, why does this penny matter at all? The answer lies in condition, errors, and collector demand. Most 2006 D pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. However, coins that have never been circulated, meaning they show no wear, scratches, or dulling, can be worth significantly more. Collectors call these uncirculated or mint state coins. In top condition, especially coins graded by professional grading services, a 2006 D penny can sell for several dollars, and sometimes more. High-grade examples with strong luster, sharp details, and no visible flaws are surprisingly hard to find because most were quickly released into circulation. Pennies are handled roughly, and very few survive in perfect shape. Another reason collectors pay attention to the 2006 D penny is mint errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the striking process. These mistakes are unintentional, and that's exactly why collectors love them. Common errors include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, and broad strikes, where the coin spreads out beyond its normal shape. There are also doubling errors, where letters or numbers appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during striking. While dramatic doubled dies are rare in modern pennies, even minor doubling can increase a coin's value. Other possible errors include clipped planchets, where a piece of the metal blank is missing, or weak strikes, where details appear faint. Some 2006 D pennies with noticeable errors have sold at auctions and online marketplaces for prices ranging from $20 to well over $100, depending on the type and severity of the error. These sales prove that even modern pennies can surprise collectors when the right factors come together. Of course, not every unusual-looking penny is valuable. Damage from circulation, corrosion, or environmental exposure is often mistaken for mint errors. Scratches, dents, and discoloration usually reduce a coin's value rather than increase it. Learning to tell the difference is an important part of collecting. To identify a genuine 2006 D Lincoln penny, start with the basics. Check the date and look for the D mint mark beneath it. The coin should weigh about 2.5 grams. The color should be a consistent copper tone, unless natural toning has developed over time. Magnification can help you examine the lettering, Lincoln's portrait, and the memorial for unusual features. Authentic mint errors usually show smooth, natural metal flow and consistent wear patterns. Fake or altered coins often show tool marks, unnatural scratches, or areas where metal has been removed or added. When in doubt, serious collectors turn to professional coin grading services to authenticate and grade their coins. One surprising fact about the 2006 D penny is how often people overlook high-quality examples. Because it's considered common, many collectors ignore rolls of modern pennies entirely. But this creates an opportunity. Carefully searching bank rolls or saved change can still uncover uncirculated coins that have never seen circulation. Another interesting detail is that 2006 was one of the last years before major changes to the Lincoln cent design. In 2009, the reverse was completely redesigned with 4 different images celebrating Lincoln's life. And in 2010, the Union Shield replaced the memorial. This makes the 2006 D penny part of the final chapter of the long-running Lincoln Memorial series. Collectors also appreciate this coin as a snapshot of American history in the early 2000s. It represents a time when the penny was still an essential part of daily transactions, before debates about eliminating the 1-cent coin became more common. Holding it today feels like holding a small piece of recent history. For many collectors, the appeal of the 2006 D Lincoln penny isn't about striking it rich overnight. It's about the hunt, the learning process, and the satisfaction of finding something special in an unexpected place. Modern coins like this one remind us that value isn't always about age. Sometimes it's about condition, rarity within commonness, and the stories we uncover along the way. Collectors love this penny because it's accessible. You don't need expensive equipment or deep pockets to start searching. You just need patience, curiosity, and a careful eye. Every coin tells a story, and even a humble penny can become a conversation piece when you understand what to look for. So the next time you come across a 2006 D Lincoln penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to examine it. Look at the details. Consider where it's been and how it was made. You might be holding nothing more than a cent, or you might be holding a small reminder that hidden value often exists where we least expect it. And that's what makes coins like this so fascinating. Ordinary on the surface, yet full of potential stories beneath. Sometimes, all it takes is a closer look to turn everyday change into something truly interesting.